Evening and good morning or good afternoon, depends where you are, so you all can hear me clearly and very loud. My name is Xiaoqian Richard Hu. I'm from the Division of Sports Science and Physical Education. I believe this is for very much of you know the first time the English name of 体育部. Alright, my name is Xiaoqian Richard Hu, and you know who I really is, given that there's a TARDIS parking over there and I have a sonic screwdriver. Alright, seems none of you watch Doctor Who. Alright, so today we're gonna talk about Olympic legacy in elite sport development. And here, by elite sport, we mean high performance sport. Just think about Olympians or the top athletes competing in the Olympic Games, in the professional baseball or basketball league. Alright, that's elite sport. And what we're going to talk about today is in what way the two Olympic Games in Beijing influenced the development of Chinese elite sport. And that was the very question I asked myself when I quit my job in Tsinghua News Agency as a sports journalist and went to the UK for my academic career. So there are 5 topics I'm going to cover today. I'll start with talk briefly about the concept of Olympic legacy. That means, what do we mean by Olympic legacy? What does it include? What does it embrace? And in what way we shall evaluate Olympic legacy? And then, the second topic, I'll provide you some brief introduction of elite sport in China, or in modern sport in China in general. Because, say, even though we are in China, we know about elite sport performance, we know the Olympic gold medalists, but through which system they are produced or developed, you will know it after this section. And for the main part of today's talk, it'll be about Olympic legacy, elite sport legacy, and all the 3 parts are following the chronological way. And I'll start with the Olympic legacy before the 2008 Olympic Games. You might be curious, why there are legacy before the Olympic Games take place? Yeah, there is, and you will know afterwards. So, the first one, Olympic legacy and some related issues. I would like to ask a question. Please raise your hand. What will come to your mind if we talk about Olympic legacy? Anyone? What do you think about Olympic legacy? If there's an Olympic Games in a city, the gentleman in front, yeah, your pick. Yes, please. Something left after the games in the city. Anyone? Anyone else? Olympic Park, exactly. The buildings, the infrastructures. And that was exactly what the concept was about initially. The concept of Olympic legacy was first introduced to Olympic documents in 1949 in the bidding documents of the city of Melbourne in Australia. They bid for the 1956 Olympic Games, and the mayor of Melbourne City indicated that if the Olympic Games could be awarded to the city, there will be an athletic center constructed for the Games, which is this one, and it will perpetuate the Olympism spirit in the continent of Australia. And then this concept gradually gained interest of all the bidding cities, and then it transferred from the idea of an Australian mayor into a must-have in the bidding documents. And the IOC also has more and more interest in this idea, and then in 2003, the concept of Olympic legacy, this term, was included in the Olympic Charter, which is the constitute of Olympic Games. And when we talk about Olympic legacy, there are a lot of beautiful things to think about. Okay, there's increase in economy, there are more tourists to the city, there are enhancement in elite sport performance. However, there are also some related issues of this term. And we can see it is argued by Cashman, the Olympic legacy is an elusive, problematic, and even dangerous word. Why this argument came out? There are some reasons, I'll show you some. The first one is the definition of Olympic legacy. Because for a long time, there's no clear definition of Olympic legacy. And this quotation is from a document published by the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, in 2013. Yes? And the name of the document is Olympic Legacy. And from reading it, you can see it refers to lasting benefits. And the game can be a tremendous catalyst and leave something more than just good memories. It seems a well and rolled around definition of the concept. However, we may ask, is it benefits for whom? Could the benefit for someone harm the interests of someone else? For instance, you know there are always an Olympic village constructed for the Olympic Games. And normally, the Olympic village is built in the outskirts of the city or the remote area. And then, after the Games, the Olympic village will be sold as flats or a house for somebody. But it normally make the price of property increase in that area and make those who planned to purchase property in that area cannot afford it anymore. Another example is, I think about a shopping mall in a city which is transferred from Olympic site. For instance, Kersong Stadium in that area or Stratford in London. There's a big shopping mall and promote economic incomes. Of course, that's good. However, think about local vendors, the convenience shop that used to be located in that area. Their business goes down significantly. So that means its benefits or negative impacts, I'm not sure. And the other reason is the multiple denotation of the word legacy. When we think about legacy, normally we think about inheritance, left by bequest, or left by the grandparents of us who passed away. However, the legacy of the games, or the benefits of games, it takes place way before the games. For instance, anybody know about the railway connecting Beijing and Zhangjiakou? Anybody? There's a railway. All right, it's already completed for the games connecting the two cities. And should the railway be recognized as an Olympic legacy? And during the construction of the railway, there's increase in the employment rate in that area. Shall the increase in the employment rate be considered as an Olympic legacy? Or the positive influence of the games? Of course, it is related to games, but the game is still not there. It's still less than 100 days to go. So that starts way before the game took place. And there's also the other side of the coin. When we think about something more than good memories, it might be related to some negative impacts. Anybody know this stadium and the Olympic Games relate to this stadium? Of course, it's way before you were born. It's the 1976 Montreal Olympic Games. And the name of the stadium is the Big O because, say, the shape of the stadium looks like big donuts. And the cover of the stadium can be lifted up to make it an open-air stadium. So the name is Big O, the shape O. However, the name is also the Big O because the city of Montreal owed big money because of the game, and they took the city just a little bit less than 30 years to repay all the debt. So that's the negative side. But what it costs is only money. However, there are also other tragedies related to the Olympic Games. The Atlanta bombing in 1996, just one day before the Olympic Games took place, and needless to say, the massacre in Munich. So that's the downside of the Olympic Games. Shall this negative impact be considered as legacy? I'm not sure. The third one refers to the problematic, if not biased, use of the word. Just like when the city bids for the games, it normally exaggerates the benefits or the positive effect of the games. For instance, there will be increase in the participation rate. There will be increase in the income of citizens. There will be enhancement in the environment. However, are these? I'm not sure. So far, there's limited literature support this kind of claim. And more importantly, how could we evaluate the net impact of the games? For instance, if there's a 1% of increase in the economy of the city. Could we argue this increase is purely or only because of the games? It's nothing related to the policy made before. It's nothing related to the investment into the city way before the game. We cannot argue about that. It's very difficult to evaluate the net impact of the games. So in this situation, the problem with Olympic legacy and the Olympic Games put the IOC into a dilemma, into a catch-22. And this is to say that, on the one hand, there's enormous investment for the games. And the media like this kind of story. They chase it. They report it. Oh, the investment into the game is numerous. It's a gigantic number. And people are attracted by this kind of story, the huge cost of the games. And on the other hand, the benefits of games, they're very unclear. We cannot even evaluate the net impact of the games. We cannot argue that, okay, this is the benefits of the games per se. So this leads to a situation that people still like the games. They still want to watch the games on TV, but they don't want the games in their city. Just think about the way Beijing won the games of 2022. There initially were 6 cities bid for the games. And then at the final stage, there were only 2 cities left, Beijing and Almaty, and the winner is Beijing, of course. And then the situation worries the IOC. Therefore, the IOC published documents in order to initiate a reform of the Olympic movement. And the documents refers to, on the one hand, they try to reduce the cost of the games, make the game more affordable, beneficial, and attractive. Though that document called Agenda 2020 and its following version, Agenda 2020 plus 5, in order to make the game more attractive, more affordable. In terms of legacy, there's another document, the Legacy Strategic Approach, published by the IOC in 2018, just before the Pyeongchang Games. All right, and the aim of the document is to capture, identify, deliver, and evaluate Olympic legacy. And first of all, it provides a much better definition of Olympic legacy. So, legacy is the result of a vision, encompass all tangible and intangible long-term benefits, initiated or accelerated by the hosting of the games, and so on and so forth. And by referring Olympic legacy is the result of vision, that means, the IOC means, this is city vision of the long-term development of the city. And this is the Olympic movement vision, what shall be achieved and will be achieved by the games. And when the two visions combine together, they realize, okay, there's something we can work together, that's the game, that's the Olympic Games. And through hosting the games, they left Olympic legacy. And the IOC, and it is important to know that it's not only the benefit initiated by hosting the games, but also accelerated by the games. And that's the real way between Beijing and Zhangjiakou. The IOC also exemplifies 7 different areas in which the games shall provide long-term benefits. And the BCOG also provides a similar version. And there's sport legacy, economic legacy, environment, and urban development, culture, human skills, and network. Yeah, this is Olympic legacy. And how shall we evaluate it? Through which apparatus we can evaluate it? There's also a framework provided by the IOC and indicated by Professor Holger Preuss. And this is framework. Holger argues that Olympic legacy is the result of what? Of the consequence changes caused by the games. So there's the vision combined together, and it leads to 2 types of constructions or 2 types of treatment. The first refers to all those requirements by the games that are compulsory for the games. And there are also other constructions which are what the city wants. And it leads to structural change in 6 domains, which are policy, skills, intellectual property, beliefs, environment enhancement, and urban development. And this is to say that, okay, a structural change could lead to legacy in different areas, and a legacy in one area could be resulted in by structural changes in different domains. Let's see this example. All right, Cadillac Center, Wukesong Stadium, that was the basketball, where the basketball took place in 2008. And after the games, this stadium was transferred into the home court of Beijing Shougang, the professional basketball team, and also a business area. So it leads to sport legacy, urban development, economic incomes, and there are also cultural events took place in this stadium. It also left cultural legacies. So a structural change in one urban development leads to legacies in different areas. And also, sport legacy could also be the consequence of structural changes in different domains. Let's take another example. There's always an increase in the performance of elite athletes from the host country during the games. We call it home field advantage. Okay, I hope you all know this term. All right, so this is the form. On the very first column is the performance of these 6 nations. They all host the Olympic Games in the 21st century. All right, this is the 2 games before the games at home. 1 game before and 1 game after. So the 2 games before, that's the number of gold medals. The numbers of gold medals their athletes win in the Olympic Games, though at the start. And then 1 game after, you can see there's increase in the performance of elite athletes from all these countries. Okay, and 4 of these countries. And in the games at home, there always be an increase, or some increase. The most increase here, the most dramatic increase. All right, and after the games, sometimes there's decrease, sometimes they perform the same, and sometimes they win more gold medals. And we call this a legacy, and sport legacy of the Olympic Games. It enhances the performance. But how could this be achieved? Because elite sport development is kind of consequence of a complex framework. It might be resulted in by some new policies, or better relationship with international federations, or with some world-renowned coaches, or the self-confidence of athletes, or an enhancement in the general consensus in the society towards elite sport, like social environment, or just because of better facilities for the winter sport. So today, we're going to look at the relationship between legacy and policy. How the Olympic Games influence the policy in China in relation to elite sport. Because, what policy leads to further development of the legacy, and this is the key to the elite sport development. So, here comes the second part of today, a brief history of elite sport in China. Before elite sport was introduced to China, or modern sport was introduced to China, by the end of the 19th century, there were traditional forms of physical activities in the country. But China was forced into modernity by the end of the 19th century, and at the same time, the Western powers also introduced elite sport to China. So, at that time, there are extrinsic functions or extrinsic connotations that was associated with elite sport in China. For instance, it is seen as a symbol of modernity. Anybody know the young man holding bracket? Puyi, the last emperor of China, of Qing dynasty, sorry, the last emperor. All right. Furthermore, it is also recognized as an element of modern education. This photo is the very first picture of the baseball team of Tsinghua University. It was taken in 1912. So that's an element of modern education that is different with the traditional physical activities. And moreover, modern sport and elite sport was also promoted by local social elite because it is seen as a powerful tool to strengthen the nation. This is inscription of the founding father of the ROC, Republic of China, Dr. Sun Yixin. Okay, this is what he tried to promote, how he tried to promote a warlike spirit through doing sport. And you can see here, even though the Tsinghua Athletic Association was founded by a famous martial artist or kung fu fighter, Mr. Huo Yuanjia, But the name is not Jingwu Wushu Association or Jingwu Kung Fu Association, it's Athletic Association. That means they try to promote a warlike spirit or to strengthen the nation through sport rather than wushu or traditional martial arts. All right. And more importantly, because China suffered very much during that time, and elite sport is seen as a platform to compete equally with other nations. And this is the first Chinese Olympiad, Mr. Liu Changchun, all right? And he went to the 1936 Los Angeles Games. And this Dr. Bo Linzhang, after watching the games, he said, okay, the Olympic Games is a competition of physical and intellectual ability and a manifestation of strong nations. This is also reflected into the Chinese translation of the name of Olympic Games. The initial version is 我能比呀, I can compete. If translate back to English, I can compete. All right. And this extrinsic connotation of elite sport has also been strengthened or enhanced in the era of the People's Republic of China. It is still seen as apparatus for strengthening the nation and to protect the country. Moreover, it is also associated with the symbolic ideological superiority of socialism. Is there anyone who watched the movie 3 Seconds about the basketball game between the USSR and the USA? That's what I mean by the superiority of socialism. How sport is associated with ideological superiority, about that idea, kind of idea. And sport is also portrayed as a symbol of the achievement during reform of China. So, and therefore, elite sport performance is highly emphasized in China. And for instance, this is quotation from the Deputy Sport Minister before the Beijing Games, and he emphasized that winning glory for the country is the duty of those who work in sport and is non-negotiable. And for those who work in sport, it's not only sport bureaucrats, they're also athletes, coaches, and they are all regarded as sport civil servants. Why is that? That is because the system of Chinese elite sport. It is known as 专业 sport. 专业 sport is a public-funded, government-administered and operated elite sport system. The athletes and coaches, they can be regarded kind of like professional athletes and professional coaches because they earn their income through practicing, competing, and coaching in sport. However, they're also different with those or those in commercially professionalized sports. Just think about NBA, Major League Baseball, or the Premier League in the UK. 专业 athletes are different with those professional athletes because, firstly, they are funded not by private fund, but by public fund. Think about our tax. They're funded by the government. And secondly, they don't have the full ownership of their human capital. Therefore, the 专业 athletes, they cannot transfer from one provincial team to another provincial team easily. They don't have the eligibility of free agent. So they are regarded as sport civil servant. And the 专业 sport system is run by a framework called 举国体制. If translated literally, that means the whole country support sport system. And 举国体制 is the framework that administered and allocate resources throughout the system. And the system is topped by the General Administration of Sport. We call it the GAS. In Chinese, we call it 体育总局. All right? And then there's provincial sport bureaus at provincial level and sport bureaus of cities or districts at the lower level, the top down. But it is worth noting that even though the GAS influence provincial sport bureaus and city sport bureaus, the provincial sport bureaus and city bureaus are funded by the local governments and also governed by them. Therefore, provincial sport bureaus and city sport bureaus, they report to local government rather than the GAS. Therefore, we can argue that the GAS only have indirect influence over the provincial sport bureaus. This is top-down administration. And for the talent development, it's bottom-up, from amateur sport schools to provincial 专业 teams and to national teams. The athletes, they are selected top down and then bottom up. And the criteria by which they are sent is the games, provincial games, national games, and the Olympic Games. And all those sport administration departments, their performance in elite sport is evaluated by their athletes in the games accordingly. All right? That's the structure of 举国体制 and 专业 sport. And this system is actually pretty effective in producing top athletes. Think about the performance of China in the Olympic Games. This is the number of gold medals China won in different editions of the Games. If we can see a kind of increased trend in this format if we exclude these two exceptional cases. This is the first Summer Olympic Games China competed in, but it's an exceptional case because the USSR and other Soviet countries, they boycotted that game. And this is 2008 we host, so we see that as an exceptional case. And therefore, you can see a kind of increased trend. So we can argue this system is pretty effective. However, this system still confronts with challenges and criticism. And the reason for that is the reform China initiated in the 1980s. I believe most of you know about that. And the aim of the reform is to install a market-oriented economic system into the country. And that means there will be free market and less control from the government. However, 专业 sports system is seen as conflict with this reform because the planned economy base of the system and the heavy, if not dominant, government control of the system. Therefore, 专业 sport has been required to initiate its reform as well. Actually, since 1980s, the essential part of the reform is the reform of the administration system of the 专业 system. However, it's not very successful. Let's think. Is there anyone knows about in which year the Chinese Football Association became independent from the government? Which year? Just recently. In 2017. The key part of this reform of administration system is to release sport association from the government. However, it took about 30 years for Chinese Football Association to do that. And compared to this part of reform, the other parts are quite fruitful. For instance, that's the reform of competition system, the reform of talent system, and promotion of the development of sport industry. That's for instance, the reform of the national games. Because the guards try to realize these interests, but they cannot directly influence the provincial sport bureaus. What do? They reform the national games and make it perfectly match to the Olympic Games. Therefore, when the provincial sport bureaus try to realize their interests through producing top athletes in the national games, and because the national games just map the Olympic Games, and these athletes, top athletes, become Olympians. They can compete in the Olympic Games, and when they produce excellent performance, the guards realize their own interests. That's very fruitful. And what's the reason behind that? Why there's limited success in the reform of the administration system? Because there are two political tasks. On the one hand, there's the task of winning glory of the country, and it relates to the number of gold medals or the number of medals Chinese athletes win in the Olympic Games. And media like that kind of story too, and they report it everywhere. And Chinese people are attracted very much by this kind of story. 4 years, once per 4 years. And it's very tangible. I relate to a lot of political kudos of sport bureaucrats. And on the other hand, the reform, it's kind of intangible. Media don't like it. There's no reports about the reform unless it is urged by the political leaders. And it also might harm the Olympic performance, harm the political kudos. Therefore, nobody wants to touch it. unless it is in line with Olympic performance. Therefore, there's limited achievement. And then there comes 2001, the Olympic Games. China won its first bid for the Olympic Games, its very first successful Olympic Games. And it was emphasized by the Chinese leaders. This is the quotation from a policy published by the Central Committee of the CPC, Communist Party of China. And at the beginning, the performance in the Olympic Games and 2008 Olympic Games in particular is highly emphasized. And it is also indicated that the achievement shall be made through further utilizing the superiority of socialism, insisting and refining 举国体制. And this is to say that the leading core of the CPC associate the superiority of socialism and 举国体制. And by doing that, they can politically endorse the legitimacy of 举国体制 before the games. And it also highlights that they're improving the integration of sport resources from all over the country, and that is exactly what 举国体制 means in Chinese. And the speech of sport ministers also follow the same pattern. For instance, here, this is Mr. Liu Peng, the then sport minister before the games. He emphasized our basic principle at this time is to obey and to serve the needs of better preparation for the 2008 games. This is in line to the attitude of the leading core of the CPC. And they also aim to motivate the enthusiasm of the majority of all the institutions. And given the dominance of 专业 sport in Chinese elite sports system, not only at that time, but in today it still is, that means all the 专业 sport teams and institutions within the 专业 system. And he also said they decide not to adopt the suggestion that will harmful to the interests of the majority. That means the reform. Because the reform aims to restructure the whole 专业 system, and it might have negative impact on the performance of Chinese athletes. And then this side is the 举国体制. What about the reform side? And interestingly, it is indicated by Chinese sports scholars that the aim of the reform is actually in line with winning glory for the country. And Dr. Xiong is a kind of very famous Chinese sports scholar, and he states that the pre-2008 reform shows consistent focus is winning glory for the country. And the reform is trying to promote Olympic strategy. And we can think about an example. Is there anyone knows about the first sport in China that was professionalized? Anyone? The first professionalized sport in China. Which game? Which sport? Anyone? Which sport was the first one? Do you know? Is there any professional sport in China? Professional league? Anyone? Watch any sport? Beg pardon, sorry? Which sport that is? That's volleyball. Is it? Soccer. Football. Yeah, exactly. Football. Football was the first sport to be professionalized in China. And anybody knows about the reason for which football was selected? Anyone? So, the then sport minister, Mr. Wu Shaozu, will tell us, we dare not touch any other sport in which we have performed well. That means football is famous for its infamous, particularly its poor performance. Because if we made any mistakes that negatively affect performance, our reform will be rejected. What I mean, the criteria by which the reform of 举国体制 is made. It's Olympic performance. That kind of dilemma. And there was a lower risk in professionalizing football. then the Olympic Games we enjoy success. That means okay. And he also indicated that, I didn't put it on the screen, that he said the Chinese football can't be any worse. If we do bad, we can do it again. So you can see that's the aim of the reform. Therefore, one the quotation from Mr. Xiong, Dr. Xiong was that everyone keep quiet. There's a lot of plural terms employed here in order to construct a social consensus towards reform. Towards the aim of the reform is to win glory for the country too. Therefore, in order to conclude what took place before the games, before the 2008 games, and there's extreme form of 治国体制 because the successful bid for the 2008 games, because we try to win glory for the country. And therefore, a temporary halt of the reform of Chinese sport in order to enhance 治国体制 to extreme form. And of course, after the games, we have new knowledge in relation to the development of elite sport. What is that? That relates to the elite sport legacy of the 2008 games in the post-2008 era. Just after the games, there was a awarding ceremony for the games hosted by the Chinese government. And in that awarding ceremony, the then President of China, Mr. Hu Jintao, indicates that the success of the 2008 Olympic and Paralympic Games has extremely promoted the development of Chinese sport. And then we need to further China's step from a sport giant to a sport power. In Chinese, we call 体育强国, to be a sport power. And given the structure of China, this term, to be a sport power, soon gained significantly in influence in Chinese elite sport. For instance, this term was immediately employed as a title of the speech of sport minister in the annual conference of all sport ministers in China. And more importantly, it is also recognized as the 10-year goal of the development of Chinese sport. All right? And however, President Hu, he didn't provide an elaboration of the term sport power. How to be a sport power? What are the criteria of sport power? Then the guards, they summoned a group of Chinese sports scholars to interpret this term. And the official interpretation was as a country with fundamental strength in elite sport. And of course, a core influence in sport in general. Therefore, there are 4 criteria of a sport power, or of this fundamental strength. You can see that the first 2 are related to elite sport performance, while the other 2 are more kind of imbalanced. And it is also acknowledged by one of the sport high-tier sport officials in the GAS that after the Beijing Games, neither the GAS or sport and administration departments have ever relaxed in preparing for the Olympic Games. And that means elite sport and elite sport performance are still emphasized after the 2008 Olympic Games. However, there's also another trend, that is a more balanced development in Chinese elite sport. You can see here. And this trend is also acknowledged in policies. For instance, the policies, the guideline for building a sport power, is published in 2019. And there are 5 strategic tasks. You can see mass participation is prioritized as a top task. And this is also the characteristic of the development of Chinese sport after the 2008 Games, that mass participation has been prioritized. However, elite sport is still important. And this is our topic today. For instance, it's emphasized by Mr. Liu Peng, the sport minister. The then sport minister, actually now it's changed to another one. The competition among powerful countries has become more and more fierce. That his annual speech to the sport ministers in all China. Okay, now he constructs a context of the development of elite sport is to try to compete with other nations. And he also emphasized the symbolic meaning of elite sport, at international level. And it is not sport in general, but elite sport in particular. He emphasized the Olympics has strong international comparability and is hence the distinctive indicator and symbol of a sport power. What does that mean? That means we cannot lose in the Olympic Games. We have to insist developing Chinese elite sport for the competition in the Olympic Games. However, there's change in the tone of policy. This is the Olympic Glory Plan, a decade-long plan, try to directing the development of Chinese elite sport, saying all countries and regions pay more attention to elite sport in the 21st century. This is in line with the statement of the sport minister, Mr. Liu Peng, that tried to construct an overall background of elite sport competition at international level. However, we can see change in the tone of policy account. The government's leadership, this is first thing that is emphasized, is jointly accentuated with civil society-based development of marketization of elite sport. This is different with the tone before the 2008 Games, because in the previous version of the Olympic Glory Plan, which is 2001 to 2010, there's no mentioning about marketization and no mentioning about elite sport development based on civil society. And we can argue that the government's leadership is a characteristic of 举国体制, while the civil society-based development is actually a feature of the reform that China initiated in the 1970s. And then it is also indicated that a new form of elite sport development that is closely associated with Olympics and has its own characteristics is established. And this statement associates the political task of winning glory for the country with a new form of elite sport development that is based on civil society. And the policy term is actually kind of ambiguous. And because it's published about 10 years ago, or actually more than 10 years ago, and there's only tiny change. But the speech from the annual speech of sport ministers provides us a more vivid example of the change in the tone in Chinese elite sport. For instance, Mr. Liu Peng indicated in his speech in 2009, he identified some of the features of 举国体制 that shall be promoted in Chinese elite sport. That is cohesiveness, effectiveness in battle preparation, and its effectiveness in integration and coordination of interests. And that is in line with the traditional 举国体制, okay, try to integrate all the resources from the country for the development of elite sport. This just 1 year after the 2008 Beijing Games. And what happened after the London Games? You can see the characteristic of 举国体制. He emphasized change to sustainability, openness, inclusiveness, integration and interaction with society and the markets. This total change in the tone of his account of Chinese elite sport and of 举国体制. And this is the last time Mr. Liu delivered his annual speech, because then he quit the office and then a new sport minister took place. Oh, by the way, 举国体制 was mentioned 13 times in his speech in 2009, but only 3 times in his last speech. And then Dr. Zhong Wengou took office. Yeah, he's a doctor. And we can see from the quotation here, it's a more balanced and all-around emphasis of the development of Chinese sport. And in Dr. Gou's speech, 举国体制 was only mentioned once, and it's here, for the development of the 3 big ball sports. The 3 big ball sports, I believe you all know, football, basketball, and volleyball. So we can see there's a change in the tone in relation to the development of elite sport after the Beijing Games. And the coexistence of the 2 trends are all related to the new political task assigned to Chinese elite sport, which is to become a sport power. So we say the new political task caused a shift in the tone of elite sport policy account, and there are new means of elite sport development, which is civil society-based development. However, even though there's change in the means of elite sport development, the goal is the same, which is to win glory for the country. And then China won its bid for the 2022 Winter Olympics. Ah, how joyful. They'll wait till it stops. So, anyone know the year in which China won its bid for the 2022 Winter Games? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, I shall remind you. It was in 2015 China won it. And before going too deep into this, I'll provide some brief history of the Winter Games. The first Winter Olympics was in 1924. And before 1994, the Winter Olympics and Summer Olympics, they were hosted in the same year. And the Lillehammer Games were the very first Winter Olympics that was held 2 years after the Summer Games. There were only 5 winter sports in the first Winter Olympics, and now there are lots of games we can enjoy in the Beijing Olympics. And Chinese winter sport is less developed than summer sports. For instance, China debuted in 1980 in the Winter Olympics, which was 4 years before China's debut in the Summer Games. However, it took longer to win the first medal and even another 10 years to win the first gold. And the performance is the same, so it's still less developed than summer sport. These are the 6 sports Chinese athletes win the most Olympic gold medals in Summer Games: diving, weightlifting, table tennis, gymnastics, shooting, and badminton. And by naming this sport, you think, okay, that sport is dominated by Chinese athletes, and you can see there are loads of gold medals, loads of total medals won by athletes. And what about the 6 Winter Games Chinese athletes most successful? Not so many. Actually, these are the 6 Winter Olympic sports Chinese athletes ever win any medals. And it is also very imbalanced. For instance, it heavily relies on ice sport. We only won 1 gold medal in snow sport, which is freestyle skiing. And it also heavily relied on short track speed skating. You can see it win 33 medals in the total of 62 and 10 gold medals. More importantly, these 10 gold medals, 9 of these 10 gold medals were from these 3 female athletes. What's her name? Anybody know? Wang Meng? Yeah. She won 4. Zhou Yang, 3. Yang Yang, 2. And the one left is won by a man. So that's 10 gold medals. Therefore, because of this kind of situation in terms of the unbalanced development of Chinese winter sport, the goal for Chinese athletes' performance in the Winter Games was not solely on performance itself, but also on the development, the balanced development of winter sport in China. And Chinese sport government also tried to copy the way in which they prepare for the 2008 Games. It started with some policies. There are 5 policies made for the preparation of the Winter Games, and only 1 is related to mass sport, to mass participation. And the guideline for inspiring 300 million Chinese involved in winter sport. We know what that means. All right, and the other 4 are related to elite sport development. But not only that, there's a whole framework designed or learned by the Chinese government. It's called SPLIS framework, Sport Policy Factors Leading to International Sport Success. There are 9 pillars that is recognized as supportive for the international success. And the pillar 1, financial support, policy framework, we'll go through it later. And they're all employed by the Chinese government, Chinese sport government. For instance, it is indicated in the guideline for the competition of the 2022 Olympic Winter Games. It is published by the GUS. So we will increase investment, which is consistent with Pillar 1, improve infrastructure and facility for winter sport, Pillar 6, fulfill the needs in training and scientific research and international affairs, which is Pillar 4, talent identification and development, and Pillar 9, scientific research, and improve all support, blah, 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 extra, which is in line with Pillar 5 and Pillar 9. And you might not notice that there are 2 pillars left, but actually there's still work. For instance, for Pillar 8, more national and international competitions, the GAS, they restructure the system of the national games and national youth games and add winter sport into it to make provincial sport bureaus pay more attention to the development of winter sport. And for Pillar 7, the coaching provision, there were in total, for the 2008 games, there were 38 foreign coaches employed by the Chinese government, by the GAS. And I got a number from the GAS for the number of the foreign coaches employed for Winter Olympics, and it was 138. 136. So it's 100 more foreign coaches employed by the GAS. And it is also emphasized, but however, there is over increase in the reforming tone of sport policies. For instance, this is guideline for the competition, and it is stated that we should attract stakeholders from the civil society to join the preparation of the 2022 Games and promote the independence of national association. This is what was lacked in the reform of winter sport, which are expected to take the responsibility of managing national squads. And this responsibility of sport associations is unheard of in Chinese elite sport in 举国体制. And this represents an increase in the reforming tone of Chinese elite sport policy. And it actually works. For instance, this is the Kunlun Red Star Ice Hockey Club. It is jointly run by the Chinese Ice Hockey Association, which is a sport association, and Heilongjiang Sport Bureau, which is from the public sector, the government sport bureau, and also the Kunlun Red Star Ice Hockey Club is from private sector, as a private club. So you can see there's a joint effort from different sectors of the society, and this club are formed with players, foreign players with Chinese origins, and they play together as a club in the KHL, which is the professional ice hockey league in Europe, and they will compete. I hope they will compete in the 2022 Winter Olympics, because it is reported that the chairman of International Ice Hockey Association is thinking about kicking China out of the ice hockey competition because we play too poorly, and they don't want us to be humiliated, but we shall see. Anyway, the most high-profile policy in relation to elite sport development is the opinion of developing winter sport through seizing the opportunity of the 2022 Olympic Winter Games. This is published by the Central Committee of the CPC. And the very first way for promoting the preparation for the Winter Games is the systemic reform of the preparation games and promoting the reform of national governing bodies of winter sport. So you can see the reformist account in elite sport policy is increasingly emphasized. And to conclude our talk today, so there is the city won the bid for the Olympic Games. There is immediate impact, or we can say output of the games. It's immediate output. And we can see we can say that is the structural change that is caused by the games. And then it leads to short-term outcomes and long-term impact. And through interacting with the society, that value generated from the Olympic legacy. If we take the example of the 2 Olympics in China, from 2001 to 2008, the immediate output refers to the policy for the preparation of the Beijing 2008 Olympics. And then it leads to extreme form of 举国体制 and postponement of the reform. and its long-term impact is the knowledge of elite sport development and new means for the similar goal. The new means is civil society-based ways. And from 2008 to 2005, a new political task was assigned to Chinese elite sport, becoming a sport power. And then there's a series of policies that emphasizing balanced development. And what it achieved is maintaining 举国体制, but with new understandings with how it can be achieved, how the political task can be achieved. And then we can see an accelerated reform with more civil society-based factors in Chinese elite sport. And right now, we're here, the immediate output, because different tasks, the balanced development rather than performance per se, is emphasized in Chinese elite sport policy, and then an integrated policy system and increasing involvement of stakeholders from civil society is also evidenced. And if we illustrate the development, you can see the games, the successful bid always resulted in structural changes, and then it resulted in Olympic legacies. Then change took place again, we go that way. And what will be achieved after the 2022 Olympic Games, we're still to see. So that's all my speech today. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. So I think there's